Beloved, pause with me and consider this truth. Silence is not empty, it bears weight, it holds power. In the quiet, things are changing, hearts, convictions, destinies. We have grown accustomed to noise, constant chatter, the roar of distractions, the relentless hum of self. We have lulled ourselves into believing that sound is life, but I declare to you, it is silence that speaks with authority. It pierces the soul, it convicts, it humbles. Have you ever sat in utter stillness and felt your heart laid bare? Stripped of pretense, forced to reckon with what is true, what matters, what abides, that is the work of silence. It separates the self-made man from the trembling sinner. It disrobes the ego, taunts the excuse, unmasks the sin, and leaves only naked truth before you. Nothing is hidden there, but nothing is lost either. Silence confronts, in it your idols fall, your crowds retreat. There remains nothing to lean on but the weight of your own bare soul. There, in that terrifying moment, you either surrender or harden. At that crossroads, your eternity trembles. I pray you to dwell in it, to submit to its suffocating embrace, to let it spit you out healed, broken, or broken yet whole, for silence is not void, it is voice. It speaks judgment and mercy in the same breath. It convicts, then it comforts, it cuts, then it heals, it compels, it awakens. Some among you fear its rustling. You rush to fill the void. Streams of data, ceaseless entertainment, constant affirmation, endless sound. You fear facing yourself. You fear the cost of truth. Yet I tell you, your fear is the fault. You do not lose anything in silence. You gain everything. All you think you own is taken. In its place, you may gain what endures. There is a revelation hidden in stillness, that you are lost, not only lost, but powerless to save yourself. Silence first crushes pride, then it whispers hope, but hope must first come after the crush. Do not bristle at the silence for exposing your shame. Don't rail against it for exposing your emptiness. This is the path to resurrection. Hear this, the crisis is not outside you, it is inside. In your unrest, your deceptions, your bargaining with reality. In your silence, that internal combat rages, false self versus true self. It is there your greatest transformation lies. If you will let silence have its way with you, it will drive you to your knees. And on those ragged knees, something like repentance rises, something holy, something real. It rends your camouflage, tears away your excuses. If you refuse it, you will remain an illusion, proud, empty, unbroken. But if you yield, you will be made bare, and in that nakedness you will be known. Real humiliation yields real grace. Silence does not shame you. It simply unmasks you. In that removal, there is power unimaginable. So I plead with you, seek the silence, dare to close your lips to the noise, dare to sit alone, uncared for, unseen. Let your thoughts echo until they break. Let your soul trend toward sobbing until it lies still. In that ruinous place, let a new song arise, a song of surrender, a song of awe, a song of trembling gratitude. Tell me, what is your confession? In what corners do you hide your shame? In what subtle ways have you made yourself small, pretending all is well, when in truth you are lost? Let the silence name your sin. Let it press you into confession you dare not speak. Let it wash over you like a flood and leave nothing framed but your utter defeat, and behind it your deepest craving for mercy. That craving, do not despise it. It is the echo of your Maker's voice. It is the breath of his love. It is the point at which he draws near. It is the point at which the silence becomes salvation. In that space, so small, so silent, he meets you. This silence is not passivity. It is the womb of revolution. The stillness is the spark. From it, new obedience issues forth, a shudder of faith, a resolution to resist the counterfeit, a resolve to walk the narrow road. a sanity of soul restored. Could you see how the prophets loved that silence, how they leaned into the hush, how David waited before the Lord, how Elijah heard not in the earthquake or the whisper of wind, but in the still small voice? That silence was not void, but radiance, and radiance, my friend, transforms. Hear me clearly. If silence has not visited you in this way, if it has not seared through your defenses, you are either dead or asleep. Awake, then, shake off the chains of continuous noise, turn off the devices, silence the busyness, enter the desert, enter the tomb, be swallowed in the nothing, for there you may be reborn. You will come out changed. Not into a superstar or a hero, but into a worshipper, a mourner, a citizen of truth, rather than a peddler of comfort. You will emerge able to speak with power, not because your voice grew louder, but because your soul grew quieter, and your words came from a place deeper than eloquence. I urge you, choose the silence. It is not safe. It will cut. It will expose. But in that crucible, everything changes. Lives, families, work, desires. Nothing remains the same. Because your motives become aligned with what truly matters, and your hands are freed from the grip of fear to touch what is worthy of your trembling devotion. Stop chasing applause. Be still. Let the silence figure you out. Let it reveal where your heart clings to comfort, to approval, to control. Let it cost you your hellish little kingdom. Let it lead you to sorrow until your tears lecture you more eloquently than any sermon. Let them carve into you a longing unspeakable. Then watch. In that gulf, grace will meet you. Some of you will resist. You will despair the emptiness. You will run back to the noise. But I tell you, what you flee from is your blessing. The voice, unconquered, mocks the noise, and ultimately you are undone, not by outside assault, but by insistent pride. But I dare you, endure the silence as you endure the Lord's refining. Let it shatter, shape, renew. Let it wrest you from illusion. Let it make you a person whose very breath worships. There are no fanfares here, no epic crescendo, only a stillness, a silence, a shudder, and a soul broken free. If you choose this, your life will change. Your eyes will open, your flesh will tremble, and you will begin to speak. Not as the world speaks, but as the world needs to hear. Be still, listen. The silence is not empty. It is dense with eternity, and it may just change everything. I trust this captures the urgency, weight, and soul, piercing tone you were looking for. Let me know if you'd like any tweaks or adjustments in tone, rhythm, or length. Silence is a crucible for transformation. True inner change doesn't come from noise, distraction, or performance, but from entering into the painful, revealing, and refining stillness where self is stripped away. Pride is broken, and the soul encounters truth. Silence births genuine obedience and clarity. Only through confronting the silence can one hear the deeper voice of conviction, realign with eternal values, and emerge with a life marked by authenticity, humility, and purpose. Silence is a crucible for transformation, not a passive space, but a refining fire. In silence, we do not merely rest, we are brought low. It is the absence of noise that exposes what we've tried desperately to cover up with sound. We live in a world that is terrified of silence. We drown ourselves in music, in conversation, in the endless scroll of digital noise, in debates, opinions, lectures, and soundtracks. But silence remains, like a judgment hovering over every distracted soul. And when it finds us, when we are forced into its presence, our hearts tremble, because silence is not an escape from reality. It is the entrance into it. We often believe that transformation comes from more knowledge, more instruction, more motivation. But the truth is, some of the deepest changes in a person's life don't come from words. They come from the lack of them. They come in the still places, the hidden places, where the echo of your own thoughts becomes unbearable. That is where the crucible begins to heat up. That is where the dross begins to rise to the surface. The proud man finds he has no applause to sustain him. The self-righteous woman realizes no one is watching her goodness. The busy soul finds no more tasks to hide behind, and suddenly, there you are, alone with yourself, with your brokenness. In that place, time does not work the same. 5 minutes can feel like 5 hours. A moment of stillness can stretch into a confrontation with your own soul. You begin to notice the voices that live in you, the ones you didn't know you've been listening to, voices of condemnation, voices of regret, voices that demand success, recognition, vindication. But none of those voices remain when silence has done its work. They can't survive the heat. They melt away in the stillness, and something else begins to speak, not from outside, but from within, from the deep places of the soul. You begin to see your need, not a casual need, not a need you can fix with another resolution or another podcast or another self-help trick. No, you begin to see the terrifying, irreparable void inside, the chasm of the soul that only something eternal can fill. That's why silence transforms, because it brings you to the end of your false resources. It exposes the lie that you are enough on your own. It dismantles the illusion that you can fix yourself. In silence, your soul is stripped of its props. It has no one left to perform for, and that is where real change begins, not in applause, not in affirmation, but in the unlit place where only God can see. Some avoid silence because they are afraid of being alone. But silence is not loneliness. It is confrontation. It is the moment you discover whether your faith is real, whether your convictions are true, whether your life is grounded in truth or propped up by fantasy. The man who cannot bear silence is often the man who has built his identity on noise. But the man who can sit in silence, who can listen to the ache within him and not run from it, that man is on the path to something sacred. Silence forces you to wait, and waiting is a fire. It burns away the impulse to control. It puts your hands down. It teaches you to listen with your heart, not just your ears. Most people don't listen to understand. They listen to respond. But in silence, there is no one to respond to. You simply listen. You listen to the groaning of your soul. You listen to the faint echoes of grace calling you back from the edge. You listen for that still, small voice that doesn't thunder but beckons. And when you finally hear it, you know it didn't come from you. It came from the one who meets people in silence, not in spectacle. The silence is not polite. It is not comfortable. It does not ask your permission. It simply arrives and waits for you to stop running. And when you stop, it shows you who you are. It shows you your pride, your greed, your fear. It reveals the addiction to distraction you didn't know you had. It takes you into your own wilderness, where every idol is cast down and every excuse is torn away. It is not a therapy session. It is a reckoning. And yet, in that reckoning, there is also mercy, because the silence does not just expose. It invites you to let go, to yield, to fall into the arms of something stronger than yourself. But you must choose it. You must choose to enter the silence. It will not force itself on you. It is always waiting, but it does not shout. It stands at the door and knocks, and most people never open the door because they fear what they'll find. But those who open it, those who dare to be still, they find not just themselves, but the truth. They find the roots of their bondage, they find the cracks in their foundation, and they find that silence, though terrifying at first, becomes a friend. It becomes a sacred place, a sanctuary, because there, in the quiet, you are finally free to hear the only voice that matters. Transformation does not come from reacting to the next emergency. It does not come from constant activity. It comes from being refined, and refinement does not happen in chaos, it happens in stillness. Like gold in a furnace, you are held in the heat of silence, and the impurities begin to rise. You begin to see what must go, and if you stay long enough, you begin to let it go. Your anger, your fear, your obsession with reputation, your hunger for control, your self-deception, all of it begins to burn, and what remains is something weightier, something real. There is a reason why many who have undergone deep transformation speak not of lightning bolts, but of silence. They speak of moments where they were undone, not by a sermon, not by a song, but by the absence of noise. A moment in a dark room, a walk in the woods, a night lying awake with nothing to numb the ache. In that space, the soul is open. In that space, the soul begins to change. Change is not flashy. It is not a performance. It is the slow death of the old self and the birth of something eternal. And death does not scream. It slips in through silence. It settles in not with chaos, but with calm. That's why silence is so dangerous to the unrepentant man, because it cannot be manipulated. It cannot be staged. It reveals the truth. And the truth demands a response. If you want to be transformed, you must learn to be still. You must stop chasing stimulation. You must face the pain you've avoided. You must let the silence do its deep work. And yes, it will feel like death, because part of you must die. The part that pretends, the part that performs, the part that lives for applause. But when it dies, something else will rise in its place. Something rooted, something unshakable. The loudest people are often the most hollow. The ones who constantly speak, constantly prove, constantly demand attention. They are often the ones who have not been refined. But the ones who have tasted silence, who have wrestled in the stillness and emerged humbled, those are the ones whose lives carry weight. You can feel it in them. They don't need to shout. They don't need to impress. They speak and their words matter, not because of volume, but because of depth, because they have been changed. Do not despise the silence. Do not flee from it. Let it do its work. Let it strip you. Let it teach you what cannot be taught in noise. Let it show you that the transformation you long for will not come through effort alone, but through surrender. Not surrender to apathy, but to the process of being undone and remade. The crucible of silence is not efficient. It is not productive in the way the world counts productivity, but it is holy, it is sacred, it is necessary, because only in that crucible can your heart be purified. Only there can your soul become still enough to receive what it could never earn. Only there does transformation cease to be a concept and become a reality written not in words, but in the posture of your heart, in the shape of your surrender, in the quiet strength of a life no longer built on noise, but on truth. Silence births genuine obedience and clarity. It is in the absence of noise that the soul learns to hear the voice that truly matters. When the world clamors for attention, when opinions rage and distractions multiply, obedience is often shallow and clarity is clouded. But when a person steps into silence, not merely the silence of external stillness, but the silence of the heart, the fog begins to lift. In that sacred hush, obedience is no longer a burden or a mere duty, but a response born from understanding, and clarity no longer a fleeting glimpse, but a settled truth. Obedience that is not born of clarity is often compliance, empty and mechanical. It is like a soldier marching without knowing the reason for the battle, or a servant performing tasks without love. Such obedience is brittle and fragile. It breaks at the first hardship or temptation. But obedience that rises from silence is different. It is a deep-rooted submission that flows not from obligation, but from a transformed heart. It is the obedience of the one who has seen the truth and who loves the one who commands. This obedience is enduring because it is informed. It understands the why behind the command, the purpose behind the call. Consider how often we rush into action without waiting to listen. We fill our lives with noise to drown out the discomfort of waiting, the uncertainty of not knowing. Yet in that rush, we miss the clarity that silence brings. We make decisions based on fear, impulse, or popular opinion. We obey rules and laws because we must, not because we have grasped their wisdom. But when we learn to be still, to quiet the distractions, we begin to perceive the distinctions between right and wrong, between fleeting desires and lasting truths. The silence acts as a lens, sharpening our vision and refining our understanding. This clarity is not merely intellectual knowledge. It is wisdom rooted in experience and revelation. It is the kind of clarity that breaks through confusion and doubt and allows the soul to say yes with confidence. It is a clarity that brings peace amidst chaos because it rests on the foundation of unchanging truth. And with this clarity comes a freedom, the freedom to obey without hesitation, to trust without reservation, to walk in the way without faltering. Silence is not simply the absence of sound, but the presence of God's whisper. It is in the quiet moments that the Spirit speaks most clearly. The prophet Elijah understood this when he realized that God was not in the earthquake or the fire, but in the still, small voice. That stillness is the birthplace of obedience. When we listen attentively, when we let that voice penetrate our hearts, we begin to understand what it means to obey not because we have to, but because we want to. Because obedience flows naturally from a heart that is aligned with God's will. But this obedience is costly. It requires dying to self, will, surrendering plans, relinquishing control. It demands humility and trust. In silence, we confront the stubbornness and pride that cling to us. We see our reluctance to obey fully, and we face the reality that our disobedience has led us into confusion and pain. The silence convicts and calls us to turn, to repent, to follow. And when we do, clarity replaces the fog. The path becomes clear, not because it is easy or without obstacles, but because we have found the light to guide our steps. There is a profound difference between hearing God's voice and merely hearing the noise of the world. The noise often tells us what we want to hear, what comforts us or suits our desires, but the voice in the silence challenges us. It calls us out of comfort zones, asks us to lay down our idols, invites us to walk in obedience even when it is costly. This voice is sometimes gentle, sometimes piercing, but it always leads toward life, and only by embracing silence can we distinguish this voice from all others. In a culture addicted to speed and instant gratification, silence teaches patience and endurance. It teaches that obedience is not a one-time act but a daily commitment, a constant listening and responding. Clarity is not a sudden flash but a steady light that grows brighter with time. It is cultivated in the soil of quietness, watered by prayer, reflection, and surrender. And as clarity grows, so does the joy of obedience, because obedience to truth is freedom, not bondage. Many stumble in their walk because they have not tasted this kind of obedience. They try to follow rules without understanding, to live righteously without being rooted in clarity. Their efforts are often marked by frustration and failure because they are based on external pressure rather than internal transformation. But when silence births genuine obedience, it changes everything. It gives birth to a life that is not driven by fear or performance, but by love and understanding. In that silence, the heart is purified. It is cleansed of the clutter and confusion that so easily entangle us. We begin to see ourselves as we truly are, flawed, dependent, yet beloved. This self-awareness is painful but liberating. It leads to humility, and humility is the soil from which obedience grows. Without humility, obedience is impossible, for it requires the surrender of self-will. Silence breaks down pride and builds up a contrite spirit willing to follow wherever it is led. Clarity, too, is a gift of silence. It cuts through the noise of competing voices and agendas. It allows us to hear the call of God's kingdom above the clamor of this world's distractions. This clarity reveals priorities and purposes that are eternal. It helps us distinguish between what is urgent and what is important, between what passes away and what remains. In silence, we gain perspective, and perspective shapes obedience. There is also a communal aspect to this. Genuine obedience born from silence does not isolate, it unites. It aligns us with the purposes of God and with others who seek the same truth. It fosters humility, compassion, and unity because it begins with a shared recognition of dependence on God's guidance. In silence, we learn to listen not only to God, but also to one another, valuing different voices under the authority of one truth. But this journey is not easy. The enemy fights against silence because silence exposes lies and weakens false confidence. Distractions are used to keep us from entering this sacred space. Fear of facing ourselves and God keeps many from embracing silence. Yet the reward is great. Those who persevere discover a clarity that no turmoil can shake and an obedience that no trial can break. Silence teaches us to wait on the Lord, to hope in His timing, to trust in His wisdom. It is a posture of surrender that leads to empowerment, because when we obey from clarity, we are not burdened, we are strengthened. We walk not in our strength, but in His, and the peace that comes from this obedience guards our hearts and minds even in the storms. In silence, the heart learns to rest. Rest in God's sovereignty, rest in His love, rest in His promises. This rest breeds confidence and courage. It gives us the boldness to obey even when the way is unclear, because we know the one who calls us is faithful. Silence nurtures this confidence because it roots us deeply in the presence of God. The clarity that comes from silence also helps us recognize false teachings, false hopes, and false gods. It sharpens discernment, enabling us to choose wisely and reject what leads to death. This discernment is a fruit of obedience, and obedience is a fruit of listening in silence. It is a beautiful cycle where each part strengthens the other. Silence also cultivates gratitude. As we listen in stillness, we become more aware of God's goodness, mercy, and faithfulness. Gratitude softens the heart and opens it to obedience. It moves us from a spirit of entitlement to one of humble service. This gratitude transforms obedience from a duty to a delight. The journey into silence is a journey into freedom. Freedom from fear, freedom from confusion, freedom from the tyranny of the immediate and the superficial, freedom to live with purpose and intention, freedom to obey out of love and clarity rather than obligation and ignorance. In a world that shouts and demands, silence whispers the truth that sets us free. It teaches us to obey with joy and clarity, to walk steadily in the path of righteousness. It invites us to surrender, to listen, to trust, and to follow. This kind of obedience changes lives. It changes families, communities, and nations. It brings light into darkness and order into chaos. It is the obedience that builds on rock, that stands firm in the storm. And it begins in silence, so embrace the silence. Let it birth in you obedience that is genuine and clarity that is unshakable. Let it shape your heart, guide your steps, and transform your life. because only in silence can you hear the voice that calls you to live truly and fully in the truth.